My name is Jen Baker. I'm a librarian at the Seattle Public Library in the Reader Services Department and a colleague of your instructors. Despite my long tenure at the library, I never tire of talking about books, and historical fiction is my favorite. So I'm delighted to give you a whirlwind tour. First, a definition of historical fiction. It must be set in a period more than 50 years ago and not within the author's conscious memory. That means no Veterans War stories, no Holocaust stories by those who were there, and very few classics are actually historical fiction. The attributes of historical fiction are as follows. Setting and plot are emphasized over other appeals. Settings are well described and true to period. At least some of the narrative events actually happened. Historical figures are accurately portrayed as much as possible. Good historical fiction could have or might have happened. Sir Walter Scott's Waverley was the trendsetter for other novelists to follow, but it wasn't until the late 1960s and early 70s that historical fiction really took off. Here's a collage of older benchmark historical fiction. Many of these are still popular with readers. The titles on the slide are the ones I think are important. Here's a list of the titles on the previous slide. I've put asterisks by the ones that are especially important to remember. Historical fiction is not like other genres with well-known and easily identifiable subgenres. Mysteries, for instance, can be broken down into subgenres that readers identify with: cozies, hard-boiled, police procedurals, and so on. In most references, historical fiction is organized by time period and geographic location. Unfortunately, readers don't always think about what they like by era or by country. So in addition to time period and geography, we need to add other subcategories of historical fiction, and we will talk about them soon. Biographical historical fiction is one of them, topical historical fiction about cultural and ethnic groups. But historical fiction is clearly set in certain time periods, regardless of its other attributes, so it's good to be aware of which historical time periods are most often emphasized in fiction. On the timeline, you can see some of the key events and eras covered in historical fiction, and as you become more familiar with the genre, you will note that trends may focus on certain time periods and then change. Right now, lots of historical novels are set during World War I, because it's the 100th anniversary year of the start of the war. Readers sometimes like to read about a particular place over different time periods. Most historical fiction written in English is set in English-speaking countries. Other geographic settings occur in historical fiction to a lesser extent, though the number is growing. One key author who writes epic-length novels covering a sweep of history about a single place is Edward Rutherford. Biographical historical fiction often features the same people in history from different perspectives. Cleopatra seems to never go out of popularity, and several really good historical fiction titles have come out in recent years. Moran's Cleopatra's Daughter is just one of them. Julius Caesar is another key figure seen in the genre. Connie Golden's Emperor series is a fabulous suggestion for biographical fiction that focuses on Caesar and his cohort. Eleanor of Aquitaine was a manipulative and beautiful queen in the 12th century, whose story is repeatedly covered in historical fiction. Alison Weir writes compellingly of Eleanor in The Captive Queen. Mary Queen of Scots is another personality in the panoply of Tudors during the 16th century. Philippa Gregory writes of her in The Other Queen. Surprisingly, there isn't much fiction specifically about King Henry VIII, but this book is the exception. Other historical novels tend to center on his wives, his sister, daughters, and surrounding household and court. Benchmark authors who write about Henry's clan are Alison Weir, Philippa Gregory, and Hilary Mantel. There are several really good historical novels about Marie Antoinette, but Naislin's Abundance is hands down the best. Biographical novels about famous authors and poets have been trending in the past several years. Sometimes the stories are connected to an author's novels or characters, as in Longbourn. In Under the Wide and Starry Sky, Horan tells the story of the Paris love affair and marriage between Robert Louis Stevenson and Fanny Osborne. Zelda Fitzgerald is featured in Teresa Ann Fowler's Z, though it's F. Scott Fitzgerald, the reader discovers in its pages. Another huge trend in biographical historical fiction is stories about artists and their works. Girl with a Pearl Earring by Tracy Chevalier, published in 1999, was the beginning of this trend. The Lacuna by Barbara Kingsolver takes a biographical view of Frida Kahlo and her husband, the painter Diego Rivera. Topical historical fiction is another subset or subgenre of historical fiction, and sea stories continue in popularity. Patrick O'Brien's Aubrey and Maturin series, beginning with Master and Commander, is currently still the best known. Historical fiction about war is a huge topical subset. Shara's World War II series is stellar and is just one of many examples. Novels about the history of medicine and its practice are also popular. Historical fiction with a science history emphasis is another topic of interest to readers. We often think of novels about cultural and ethnic groups as separate from genre fiction, but many historical fiction readers are interested in titles like these, and a good reader's advisor will have a few in mind to suggest. The Help, Beloved, and The Known World are excellent historical fictions about African Americans. Asian American historical fiction is also huge, especially Jamie Ford, Amy Tan, and Lisa See. Historical fiction about different religious groups is not as popular as other topics, but readers who enjoy it will ask for more. When it comes to historical fiction blended with other genres, things can get confusing. The Secret History of the Pink Carnation is a combination spy story, historical novel, and romance. A Sudden Country is a historical pioneer story, but it's also a literary love story, and it's not a genre western. Game of Thrones is a fantasy, but it's set in a medieval world that looks a lot like Great Britain's. I mention genre blends only because some readers think of these books as historical fiction. As I mentioned earlier, setting is one of the most important appeals for historical fiction readers. Period details about scenery, dress, and manners are vital. Avid historical fiction readers look for bibliographies, family genealogy charts, and even footnotes. Anachronisms get spotted instantly. Even one egregious error can ruin a book for some readers. Getting the dialogue right is one area that many authors struggle with. In addition to the appeals of historical accuracy and intricate plotting, most readers say they read historical fiction to learn history without really trying. Most currently popular benchmark authors of historical fiction have already been mentioned in this presentation. Here's a quick review. Philippa Gregory is well known for novels about the Tudors from the perspective of minor characters and famous women of the court. They are filled with romance and political intrigue. Jeff Shara is well known for war stories. His talent is in making readers feel as if they are actually experiencing the war. Edward Rutherford writes door-stopper-length epics about places. He usually focuses on several families and follows generations through history. Bernard Cornwell writes books in series that cover a broad sweep of history through the eyes of common people. Conor Golden writes mainly about ancient and medieval history. I think of his stories as manly men doing manly things. Susan Vreeland features biographical historical fiction about artists and their works. And Sarah Dunnett writes about Renaissance Italy, usually from women's perspectives. These are some historical fiction readers' advisory resources you may find useful. The website for the Historical Novel Society is chock full of book reviews and short articles about historical fiction. It's a great resource for keeping current in the genre. The Historical Novels website lists over 5,000 historical novels according to time period and place. Many of them are older titles and hard to find titles, which sometimes can be of great value. Sarah Johnson's excellent Historical Fiction 2 reference contains hundreds of historical novel suggestions, listed by time period and well indexed by author and subject. My new book, The Reader's Advisory Guide to Historical Fiction, is a good resource for newer titles of historical fiction than most other print resources list. It also breaks the genre down differently from other resources, gives tips on talking with readers, ideas for marketing your collection, and how to stay current. My thanks to Jim Beaver for his help designing this presentation, and to you for listening. Thank you.